Okay, let's go. Today we're learning Maseches Kiddushin Daf Tes Zayin, and we're starting 5 lines down. First word on the line, Ubishtar. I will not be here tomorrow or the next day. Mirz Hashem, I'll be posting shiurim over the course of the next 2 days. I have no idea when. We'll figure it out. Says the Gemara Bishtar, how do we know that an Eved can be nicknamed Bishtar? Says the Gemara, Minolan Amar Ula Amar Kra, because the pasuk says, Imacheres Yikachlo, that if he were to have an Ama Ivriya, and if he were to marry her, and then Imacheres Yikachlo, if he were to take another wife, Hikisha Hakasav La'acheres. The Ama Ivriya is compared to another woman, to a regular woman. Ma'acheres Mekanya Bishtar. Just like a regular woman can be nicknamed Bishtar, first off of the Masechta. So to have Ama Ivriya, Mekanya Bishtar, and that serves as our first Mara Makom. We have an answer as to why a star works for Amma Ivriya. Says the Gemara, that kind of works. That when a star for the Amma is written, Amma Ivriya is written when it's Adon Kosvo, when the master, when the guy who's buying the Amma Ivriya writes a letter, writes the star to the father of the Amma Ivriya. Very similar to a ksuba. But if the father were to be the one who writes his daughter away, that's not the model of a ksuba. And after all, we know that this is a machlokes as to what the phraseology was in the star of an Amma Ivriya, because, as the Gemara says, the Itmar, the Amoraim, argued this star Amma Ivriya Mikosva, who was the author of the star of Amma Ivriya. Do we say Rav Huna Amar Adon Kosva, that the master wrote it, in which case it's similar to marriage? Or do we say no, Rav Chizda Amar Av Kosva, that the father writes it, in which case the star is not similar to marriage? And Hanicha le Rav Huna, when it's written similar to marriage, and Ela le Rav Chizda Ma'ikal Meimar. So the Gemara says that according to Rav Chizda, the way that we could understand how the star would work is based on another pasuk, Amar Avacha Bar Yaakov Amar Kra Lo Seitze Keseso Avadim, that you do not go out like the way that Avadim go out. Aval, when you go in, aval niknes hiki kinyan avadim, but a star does work on the way in, like a regular kinyan of avadim for the Amma Ivriya. So my nihu, that's a star. The Gemara says, Ve'ema, perhaps we can say that the second half of the drasha is different. That when the pasuk says, Lo tzeise keseso avadim, we don't say that she should therefore be niknes bishtar. Maybe we should say, Aval niknes hi kikinyan avadim, umayniu chazaka. That perhaps there's some kind of chazaka that would establish her to be a spouse. Amarkra, that can't be, because that there's a nachala of osam, of them, to the children after you. Osam, that's when we're talking about non-Jewish avadim bechazaka, below acher bechazaka, but the Jews cannot be purchased bechazaka. Osam b'shtar below acher b'shtar. Maybe we should say that only the goyim can be purchased b'shtar, but Jews can't be purchased b'shtar. Says the Gemara, that can't be, because aksiv lo tzeisei keseso avadim, as we already saw. The pasuk says lo tzeisei keseso avadim, and it has to be similar to a shtar. Says the Gemara, but I could have learned it both ways. I could have learned that pasuk was talking about a shtar or a chazaka. Uma rois. Why did you learn it this way, that it's a shtar? Gemara provides a couple of answers. Mistaber shtar. It makes more sense to say that what the pasuk was teaching about lo seitze keseso avadim was about a shtar, because havalei ribuye. Why? Shekain motzi b'bas Yisrael, because a shtar is used as a get to undo a marriage. Therefore, a shtar is used to get into marriage, and the same should be true for Amma Ivriya. Says the Gemara, Adarabba, I could argue the exact opposite, that chazaka havalei the ribuye, that we should have learned the pasuk of lo seitze keseso avadim that is talking about a chazaka, shekain kone benichse hager, because in regards to the nichse hager, when a ger dies, he has no family, because he's a ger, he's not related to his previous family, and the people are allowed to take their properties bechazaka, and chazaka works. Says the Gemara, you're right that it works over there in regards to kinyan of nichse hager, but beishus mihas, when it comes to the world of ishus, we never see that a chazaka works lo ashkechan. And because of that, says the Gemara, therefore, when the pasuk says lo tzeitze keseso avadim, it means to say that because it's not even reasonable, there is no precedent for chazaka working by a marriage, we therefore assume that when the pasuk says lo tzeitze keseso avadim, that is talking about a shtar, and therefore, whether or not you hold like Rav Huna or you hold like Rav Chizda, either way, we have a way of teaching that a shtar can be the reason why an Amma Ivriya is married. And halfway down on Tezayin Malach, the Gemara says, or perhaps I can say, Lahachi Ahani Imacheres, that maybe just stam, the extra words of Imacheres come to teach us in regards to a shtar, as we saw at the top of the page. If you have another wife, if you marry the Amma Ivriya and another wife, that was a drush we made at the top, Manav Shach, one way or the other, this should be the case, that an Amma Ivriya can be nicknamed Bishtar. Says the Gemara of Rav Huna, Hi, lo tzeitze k'seis ha'avadim. According to Rav Huna, he didn't need to go through all of these hoops because he said already that the shtar of the Am HaIvriya was written similar to that of a ksuba. So we didn't need to come on to this second answer of Rav Chizda, according to Rav Huna, who doesn't need to explain lo tzeitze k'seis ha'avadim. Hi, lo tzeitze k'seis ha'avadim, my darshbe. What does he do with this pasuk? Says the Gemara, the pasuk of lo tzeitze k'seis ha'avadim, hahumi boile she'ena yotza beroshe evarim ke'eved, that an Am HaIvriya has a different din in regards to injuries. We know, for example, that a regular Eved, not an Am HaIvriya, but a regular Eved, if his tooth falls out or if his eye falls out or any of his fingertips and other injuries, as we will soon see, that we know that they go free. This is not true in regards to an Am HaIvriya. She does not go free with those kinds of injuries. Rav Chizda, where do you learn that din from? If Rav Huna is learning it from the pasuk of lo tzeitze k'seis ha'avadim, and you already used it to teach us about a shtar, so where do you learn this from? Says the Gemara, "Imken lichtov kra lo tzeitze ka'avadim, my kitzeis ha'avadim." Why is the pasuk more full with the word lo tzeitze kitzeis, the double language of tzeis? Says the Gemara, "Shma min atarte," I can learn two words, and therefore Rav Chizda says. Rav Chizda says that from the pasuk of lo tzeitze kitzeis ha'avadim, I learned two things. Number one, I learned that an Am HaIvriya can be niknes b'shtar, and number two, I learned that if she does get injured in a way where a fingertip falls off, her tooth falls out, or by injury, she does not go free. And that brings us to the two dots. More than halfway down on Tezayin Amidal, the Gemara says, "V'kones atzmo b'shanim," that an Eved can acquire himself in years. Where do we know this from? That 6 years is the minimum and maximum term without becoming a nirtza. Says the Gemara, no problem at all. This is an easy one. And we could finish the pasuk. So he works for 6 years and he goes free. That's how we know that years can be a form of an Eved leaving his abdus. And then we said Yovel, that as well, when we hit the Yovel, the 50th year, the Eved also goes free. So let's say the 6th year is interrupted by Yovel, he goes free. How do we know? That up until the Yovel, he works free and then he goes free. The Mishnah also said, B'geron kesef, that if a person pays off what he's worth, if he somehow finds money and he was worth $600 and he was paying $100 a year, so on year 3, he could pay the balance of $300 and then go free. How do we know that works? Because the pasuk says we're 2/3 of the way down with the two dots. That she can reduce her pidyon and she can go free. The Am HaIvriya can go free. Tana, we have a brisa, and this brisa is going to take us not too long. V'kone es atzmo bekesef uv'shvei kesef uv'shtar, that an Eved can acquire himself, meaning make himself an Eved with kesef, with money, shvei kesef, that which is worth money, uv'shtar. B'shlama kesef, dichsiv mikesef miknaso. I understand that you can make yourself an Eved with money because the pasuk says you can make yourself an Eved. Yourself an Eved with money. Shvei kesef nami, even that which is an equivalent of dollars. I don't know how we would view a check in halacha. Is a check dollars or is a check equivalent to dollars? It's very delayed. It's not automatic. It's I don't know. If you pay by Zelle, you got to do something. No, but a check. It's not. It's not money. That's the same thing as bringing it to the bank.
Okay, but it's instantaneous. There's no delay of time.
You can't take it to 7-Eleven.
It's not cash. It's not cash.
Okay.
These are discussions in posting. Credit cards are more complicated. Credit cards are more complicated because there you're paying the credit card company, and the credit card company pays the vendor, and then you owe the credit card money. So that's already super indirect. Debit cards are better than credit. These are all shilas and poskim about how we
lose a little bit.
What?
Lose a little bit.
Yeah.
No, but I remember I was told that I had to, my wife's ring, I had to buy it in cash.
You can't do it with a check?
No check, no credit card, it had to be.
I don't know if that's a chumrah, if that's a din, I have no idea, but it makes sense that cash is the right way
That's
to go.
why I wrote a check.
Or if you pay the credit card and then if you pay your credit card bill down after you buy the ring, does that count also? Because you're done now. Now all of your money is out of hand.
What if you pay the credit card first?
I'm just raising a case scenario that if I put money on a credit card and Chase says, fine, I'm paying New York Jewelers. And then I go for my checking account, I go on Chase and I pay the $40, $50, $60 of the ring. My transactions are done. They have their money come out instantly within a day, and I paid off. I'm done. Now there's still stuff happening, but is that considered a payment? That's what you're talking about. I don't know. But anyways, how do we view Shvei Kesef Nami? That's based on the pasuk Yashiv Geula. So the word Yashiv is extra. Amar Rachmana. The Rabbo Shvei Kesef Kikesef. That Ladina, you can make yourself into an Eved with Shvei Kesef as well, and that's based on the pasuk. What's the case of the star that we're talking about? Ilema de Kasav Le Shtara Adme. Adame, if you're saying you're writing a star for your value, the star says I'm worth X, and here's a star I'm going to pay you. Hainu Kesef. That sounds like a check. It's very similar to a check, actually. Ela Shichrur, if you want to say that what the pasuk is talking about in regards to star, not the pasuk, what the Bryce is talking about in regards to star is that he's going free. You don't need to write a star for the Eved to go free. Star lamali lema leba ape tre. You should go in front of two people and say, Zil, this guy is welcome to go free. You don't need a star for that. Or inami ba ape bedina, go in front of Bezdin and say Zil. So Amarava, what do we see from here? Zosomeres, there's a diuk from here, and again, this requires time, that Eved Ivri Gufo Kanui, that the Eved's body is actually owned by the master, and therefore in such a case, Harav Shemachal al Garono, when a Rav is trying to be mochel on the balance of the cost of the Eved, he's not allowed Ein Garono Machal, so how does he then free that person? It can only be Bishtar, V'haraya, that's what it's talking about in the case of Shtar. And then we had said Yisera Alav Amha Ivriya, that the Amha Ivriya has another way that she goes free. And we spoke about the fact that when she becomes a Nara, when she's maybe Shtei Sairos and she has Simonin, so then she gets to go free. That's 2 pubic hairs. So the Gemara is going to say that's a uniqueness that applies by an Amha Ivriya that doesn't apply by an Eved Ivri. By an Eved Ivri, the hairs don't change anything. So let's analyze this. So we're going to learn the Shita, I should say. We're going to learn the approach of Reish Lakish, and then we're going to bat it around like a piñata and see how if it stands up the test of time. It says the Gemara Amar Reish Lakish. In fact, this sugya will take us to the end of the day. Amah Ivriya kona es atzma b'misa sa'av merishus adon mikal v'chomer. An Amah Ivriya can get her freedom when her father dies, and she gets freed from the rishus of the master when her father dies. So let's say Ruvain's daughter is Rachel, and Rachel is Na'amah Ivriya to Shimon. When Ruvain dies, Rachel goes free from Shimon. And what's the Kal V'chomer? Uma Simonin. When it comes to Simonin, when it comes to the Shtei Sairos, Shein Motzin Mirishus Sa'av, Motzin Mirishus Adon, that when a Nara turns in Simonim, she becomes a Nara, and then she doesn't leave her father's house. It's under her father's watch, but she does leave the house of the Adon. If Rachel was a Na'ara, she got Shtei Sairos under as an Amah Ivriya, she goes free. So then Misa, by death, Shemotzia Merishus Ha'av, Enodin Shemotzia Merishus Adon. Fascinating Kal V'chomer. So the Gemara says that seems to be Reish Lakish's Shita. Therefore, if Rachel's father, Ruvain, dies, if she's an Amah Ivriya to Shimon, she goes free with her father's death. They seem completely unrelated. They seem to have nothing to do with one another. The Gemara says that the Kal V'chomer is sufficient, that she would then go free. If Rachel's father died, then she's no longer an Amah Ivriya to her master. Says the Gemara, question number 1 of a number of questions. Meisvei, hang on one second. Or really, Masiv Rev Hoshaya. We had learned in our Mishnah, Yeseira Alav Amha Ivriya Shekones Atzma B'Simonin. We had said in our Mishnah that there's a uniqueness to the Amha Ivriya that when she is maybe Shtei Sairos, she goes free. So asks the Gemara, if that's true, V'Misa, that she goes free when her father dies, Nisni Nami Misa Sab. Why didn't the Mishnah detail that extra fact that she should go free? Right? You told me that she goes free from Simonin. If you're telling me that there's another way she goes free, and that's through Misa Sa'av, don't leave it off the list. The Mishnah told us the many ways that a woman is Kona es Atzma. And if you're saying that Yisera Allah, that we have an extra chiddush, that the Amma Ivriya goes free with Shtei Sairos when she becomes she's maybe Simonin, then you should add to the list another way. She goes free with Misas Ha'av. Why didn't you add that? Says the Gemara, ton of a shiur. It could have been taught, but it didn't need to be taught because it was among a couple of things that were left off the list. And whenever we have the answer of ton of a shiur, we always have the follow-up question. Says the Gemara, my shiur to high shiur. If this one was left out, namely, if the Kone es Atzma of the Amha Ivriya, that her father died, was not listed in the Mishnah, what else was not listed in the Mishnah that's in the same category? So says the Gemara, maybe we should say shiur misas ha'adam. Perhaps we should say that the death of the master, Forget about Reuven. If Shimon dies, she goes free. And if you're going to say that that's what was missing, you can't say that because it was already listed somewhere else. Because the cave the ikanami beish loktani, that because the same rule applies by men. That's not an isha kones atzma. That applies across the board. Pashat, that's true. That's not what was left out. And if that's the case, you should have listed the misas ha'av is one of the ways that she's going to be kones atzma. So to that, the Gemara says, Tana. You're right. The Mishnah was only listing items that had a fixed aspect to them. For example, 6 years, right? When they get to 6 years, she goes free, fixed. We know exactly how long it is. But davar she'eno lo kitzva lo ktani. But the things that a woman is kona es atzma that are not fixed in time, those things are not listed. So asks the Gemara, v'hasimanin was listed in our Mishnah, being maybe shtei cyrus was listed, de'en lem kitzva v'ktani. We don't know when this girl is going to grow shtei cyrus. We have no idea. You just said that the theme of the Mishnah and the reason why misas ha'av was left off of our Mishnah as a way that a woman can go free as an amma ha'ivriya is because it's davar hakatzuv. So therefore 6 years works out and misas ha'av doesn't belong because it's not katzuv. We don't know when the father's going to die. But we have a kasha that in that very same Mishnah, we have simanin, and simanin are also unpredictable. The Gemara gives a fascinating answer on the bottom line of Tazayin Amar Aleph. The Gemara says, Amar of Safra, in lam kitzva l'mayla. You're saying, you're right. We don't know if she didn't grow these hairs when she was younger. We have no idea when she'll grow them. Let's say she didn't grow hairs when she was 9 or 10. We don't know. She hasn't grown. So you're right. We don't know when she's going to grow the hairs. But on the bottom side of things, aval yesh lem kitzva, as we turn to the top of Tazayin with Bez lemata, on the lower end, we actually do have a categorical place of even if she grew hairs, it wouldn't count. And that's considered to be katzuv. Take a look at Rashi. Rashi says on the top of the page, lemata, that im hevia lifnei zmana einon simanin. If she got grew the hairs at such a young age, and we're going to detail what this means, then that's not considered to be shtei cyrus. In fact, the Gemara says at the top of Tezayin Amud Beis Tanya, what is the time frame in which a girl, I should say, who's beginning to grow these hairs, in which they are meaningful? Says the Gemara Tanya, Ben Tesha Shanim Shevi Shtei Cyrus Shuma. If a boy, and by extension, even if a girl were to grow these hairs by the age of 9, then it's shuma. Then we consider it to be like a mole. Sometimes when a person has a mole, the hairs grow out of the mole. If a person is underage, they're only 9 years old and they grow hairs, that's not considered pubic hair. That's something else. That's not considered shtei cyrus. Mi ben tes shanim, from 9 if those 2 hairs are still there and the child grew no other hair, that's a machlokas shuma. Tanakama holds that's still the hair of a mole. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Omer siman that it does count. And lastly, Ben Yud Gimel Shan of Yom Echad Divrei Hakol Siman. Everyone agrees that if a person is 13 years old and they grow new hairs, that those 2 hairs, not even if they grow new hairs, but those 2 hairs are then considered to be a siman. In short, we asked Akashya as to why it is that Misas Ha'av was not listed. The Gemara answered that the reason why Misas Ha'av was not listed is because our Mishnah is only talking about things that are katzuv. And 2 examples of things that are katzuv are, number 1, the 6 years is katzuv, and also knowing that a girl who grows hairs below the age of 9 is invalid is also considered katzuv. We have an element of the growth of hair of simanim that's considered fixed. And that's all question number 1 against Reish Lakish. And here's question number 2, Tazayin Amud Beis, 5 lines down, Masi Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes says he has another problem. We have a brisa that says as follows: Reb Shimon Omer, Dalid Ma'an Nikin Lahen. There are 4 people who get gifts, 4 scenarios where a person gets gifts, not people. Gimel Be'ish, 3 of them apply to a man. The Gimel Be'isha, and 3 of them apply to a woman. But not all of them can apply. Not all 4 answers can apply to everyone because some are limited to each gender. It can't be that the 4 scenarios where people get gifts apply to either a man or a woman. Why? Why? Because a boy who grows shtei cyrus doesn't go free, so that can't be a way that he's kona es atzmo. And ve'ein ritzia be'isha, and a woman is not able to stay in servitude by deciding that she wants to get her ear pierced. V'im Isa, and if in fact you want to say, like Reish Lakish does, that by Misa Sa'ab, that Rachel will go free from her servitude of Shimon as an Amma Ha'ivriya, says the Gemara, Nisne Nami Misa Sa'ab, then you should say Misa Sa'ab in this brisa, yet seeming that you didn't do that. If you want to say that really Misa Sa'ab was left out because of Tana V'Shir, that can't be. We can't say that there's Tana V'Shir. Why not? Because we have a very specific number of cases. So you can't say Tana V'Shir. Even if you left one out, we don't have room to say that there's a second one that you left out because we have a maximum number of 4. There only are 4 cases. So it says the Gemara, perhaps in this Mishnah you want to say that these 4 items, 3 of which apply to a man and 3 to a woman, are things that have kitzvah, things that are fixed like the number of years of servitude, but things that aren't fixed like misa sa'av, they are not listed. We know that simanin are not katsuv, says the Gemara. That's not true. We just learned at the top of the page that that's not true. If you want to say like Rav Safra did, that you're right that on the upper limit, there we don't know when a young girl is going to grow these shtei sairos, but on the lower limit, we know that they don't grow up until the age of 9. So if that's true, we still have a case of misas adon, which isn't katsuv. We don't know when he's going to die, and that was listed as well. So it says the Gemara, Misas Adon Nami Loktani. It must therefore be that Misas Adon was also not written. So it says the Gemara, wait one second. Vela Arba, my nihu. What are the 4 cases? And as we've already said in the Brisa, 3 of which apply to a man and 3 of which apply to a woman. Which of these 4 cases are there? We have Shanim, that applies to men and women. V'Yovel, that applies to men and women. Those 2 things are things that free up a woman. The Yovel Shel Ritzia, that only applies to a man, because Ritzia only applies to a man. The Amma Ivra B'Simanim, and that a woman goes free with Shtei Sairos, that only applies by a woman. So it says the Gemara, Hachanami Mistabra. It's logical to assume that these are the 4. We're a third of the way down on Tezayin Amid Beis. We're going to be stopping about 10 lines from the bottom of the page. This is logical because the Seifa says as follows. We had said that you can't say that all 4 of these apply to both men and women. Only 3 do. Because one of the 4, which is simanim, only applies by an amma ivriya. That doesn't apply by a man. The piercing of the ear only applies by a man and not by a woman. And if you want to say, like Reish Lakish recommended, that really a woman goes free from Shimon when her father Ruvain dies, if you want to say that, then that's a 4th one. Because we have 3 that already apply. And if we look at the list, we can count them. We have Shanim, we have Yovel, we have Simanim, and now here's a 4th one, Misa Sa'ab. Shma Mina, that in fact, this is the case that we reject the Shita of Reish Lakish. Says the Gemara, another question. Masi Rav Amram. Rav Amram asks a question. Ve'elu ma'anikim lahem. There are case scenarios where when this particular person leaves servitude, that they are given gifts by the Baal. Hayotze b'shanim u'v'yovel u'v'misa sa'adon ve'am ha'ivriya b'simanim. In these 4 cases, these are people who go free and get gifts. You have a person who's been there for 6 years, a person who's been there for 50 years, a person whose adon died, and an am ha'ivriya b'simanim. And says the Gemara, V'Misa of Reish Lakish is right that perhaps by Misa Sa'av she'll go free from her Baal, from her Adon, then Nistinami Misa Sa'av. Then Rav Amram's Brisa should have included the case of Misa Sa'av. If you want to say that really it does apply, that Misa Sa'av is the case, it's true, and Reish Lakish is right, and you want to argue that Tana V'Shir and Misa Sa'av was left out from this brisa, among other things, that's not possible, because our brisa says, V'ha eluk tani, it says that these are it. These imply exhaustive. This is it. This is our list. If you want to say that the reason why this list is listed the way that it is because everything in that list is katsuv, like years and yovel, that's not true. That's not true. Then because we have simanin, and we already said that simanim are not katsuv. And that's one side of the argument. But and even if you want to say, like Rav Safra, that there is an aspect of simanim that are katsuv, it doesn't matter. Included in this list explicitly in the brisa that Rav Amram brought. And this brisa talks about misas adon. So says the Gemara, to yufta de Reish Lakish, to yufta, we therefore reject the shita of Reish Lakish. What that means is that Reish Lakish wanted to say that when Rachel's father died, she's no longer in servitude as an Am HaIvriya. We reject Reish Lakish, and therefore when Rachel's father dies, she remains in servitude to Shimon. Says the Gemara, how can you reject this outright, even if you have your own svaras? It doesn't matter. Reish Lakish kal v'chomer amar. Reish Lakish gave a kal v'chomer. Kal v'chomers are very strong, and they're more powerful than the questions that you just posed. We'll find an answer to your questions. But if Reish Lakish has a real kal v'chomer, then you have nothing to really argue with. Says the Gemara, kal v'chomer prichahi. It's actually a brittle kal v'chomer. It's not a great kal v'chomer. Because there's really no comparison between within the Kal V'chomer of Reish Lakish, where he compared the Simanin to Misas Ha'av, there is a difference that when it comes to Simanin, when it comes to her growing Shtei Sairos, that's a din and a change in her body. Before the Shtei Sairos, she wasn't a Naira. Now she is a Naira. However, Tomar b'Misas Av Shekain Lo Nishtana Haguv, when her father dies, her body doesn't change. There's no hair growth. One thing doesn't connect to the other. So says the Gemara, not a raya. And seemingly from here, we reject the shita of Reish Lakish outright. And if we were poskim, which we're not, we would assume from our Gemara that if a woman were to be an Amma Ivriya to Shimon and her father Ruvain dies, we would not say like Reish Lakish that she goes free, yet rather she remains in servitude. 2/3 of the way down, another 15 lines or so, we have a stira in Brisas. Tanicha, the one brisa says, Enek Eved Ivri le'atzmo, the gift of an Eved Ivri goes to himself. Enek Am HaIvriya le'atzmo. Brisa number 1 says that the Am HaIvriya gets the gifts when she leaves. The Tanya Idach, another brisa, seems to disagree. Enek Am HaIvriya mitziasa, not to herself, but le'aviha, that when an Am HaIvriya goes free, that her findings and her enek, the gifts, go to her father, not to her. And ve'ein le'rabba ela schar batala bilvad. And the only thing that the rab, that her master gets, is the amount of time that she spent working for him. So says the Gemara, my love, how do we understand these brisa? One's talking about where she's free because of simanin. In the first case where we say it's le'atzma, that's where her father died. In the second case where it goes to her father, that's where she's nafka b'simanin. Says the Gemara, 3/4 of the way down low. That's not the right way to understand the brisas. Really, both brisas, both brisas, the nafka b'simanin, are talking about a case where she does have shtei saros, she has 2 hairs. Below kasha, and in one case her father's alive, and in one case her father's not alive. So it analyzes the Gemara further as follows. Bishlama the brisa that says Enek Amo Ivriya le'atzma le'me'ute achen. I could understand the brisa which says that she gets the enek, she gets the gifts, and it's to teach us that her brothers don't get the gift. The Tanya, the brisa writes, in regards to the gifts that an Amo Ivriya gets for herself, I might have thought Osam livnechem, that by non-Jews they go to the bnechem, but below benosechem livnechem, but the sister doesn't fall to the brothers as an Am HaIvriya. Mikan she'ein adam morish zuchus bito livno, that if there are certain rights that a father had from his daughter and the father dies, we don't pass on those rights to the brothers. Ella, what about the second brisa? The second part of the brisa, I should say. Ella enek Eved Ivri le'atzmo pshita. The fact that the gifts that come out after Eved Ivri, that they go to this person in particular, that's obvious. Ela Laman, who else would it have gone to? So the Gemara responds, Amar Rav Yosef, Yud Koras Kochazina Hacha. I've never seen this in Shas. Yud Koras Kochazina Hacha. Take a look at Rashi. Rashi says 15 lines from the bottom, Dibur HaMaschal, Yud Koras. Yud Shehiktana, Yud, which is a small letter, Asa Ir Gedola, was made into a large city. It's a mashal, and Rashi explains in the last 4 words, Klamar, Herich Mishnaso Chinam. He lengthened the Mishnah for no good reason. Namely, when the Brisa said Enek Eved Ivri La'atzmo, that you're right, it's completely extra and unnecessary, and we learn nothing from it. That's very difficult. Why would we ever do that? nevertheless, the Gemara says that there are times where an evet, where a brisa may have some extraneous words. Abai disagrees. Abai Amar, no. The reason why we have the brisa which says enek evet ivri la'atzmo is not pshita. Rather, it's Hachi Amar Rav Sheshes Hamani, it's Tutoihu. Tutoi was the name of a Tana. Titania, Tutoi Omer, lo, velo lebal chovo. That we have a preclusion that we're talking about to him and not to his Baal Chov, namely, that if the Eved HaIvri owed money to another person, these gifts don't go to the other person, they remain with him. Therefore, we needed our brisa to be explicit about it. We're going to stop right here at Gufa, which is 10 lines or so from the bottom of the page. I'll make a recording and post at some point tomorrow. Wishing you all a beautiful night. We're back together in person again, probably Friday morning, but I'll post about that too. Good night.